Imagine sitting in class with your favorite professor. You love their jokes, perspective, examples. Everything they do to you is just a joy, of course. But now imagine sitting in class with your favorite professor for every class all day long. Or even every class all day long, every semester. Or, I'm sure you can see where this is going, every class, every semester for all 4 years. You probably wouldn't even like your favorite professor anymore. See, you might have had a hard time imagining that because the idea of having the same professor for every class, every semester, all 4 years is just ridiculous. We have classes with different professors and we take general education courses so we can approach the problems in our jobs and our lives and in our worlds with perspectives from different people and expertise from different disciplines. We prepare our students for success that way by diversifying their educations. We value creative problem solving made possible by varied resources, except for whatever reason in the area that it matters most, which is our government, specifically our Congress. As someone who is really interested in politics and involved in student government, I've studied Congress excessively, and I've learned that in a study done by Princeton University, the participants chose the incumbent candidate over 70% of the time. Instead of widening the resources of our Congress, incumbents who have the clear advantage of lack of competition and name recognition linger indefinitely. These reasons, among several others, are why in the speech I'm going to convince you, hopefully, that congressional term limits are absolutely necessary, that there is a plan for them, and that that plan does work. So like I said, we absolutely need congressional term limits, and I'm going to focus on 3 main reasons why. The first one that I touched on a little bit, which is it provides a vehicle for the spread of creative and innovative ideas. And I'm going to give you another example of that. So we've all heard of TED Talks. As students, we've had to watch them in class, and as professors, you've probably shown them to your students a few times. But something you probably don't know is that according to TED, their videos are watched at a rate of 1.5 million times a day. That's a new showing starting every 17 seconds. But what they don't tell you is why people love their videos so much. But their motto explains that for you. They specialize in ideas worth spreading. Not okay ideas, not even good ideas, but creative and innovative ideas. We live in a society and in a world that values creativity and innovation, and the success of TED shows that truth exactly. But like I said with that Princeton University study, most of the time we're just voting for the people who are already in office. The second reason why we need term limits is for the sake of principle. The 22nd Amendment of the Constitution puts term limits on the office of president, but the double standard makes no sense. The office of president was restricted for much the same reason that Congress should be, which is to prevent power and corruption. It should be even more important for the people that create our laws to have their power and corruption restricted. The double standard isn't just. The third reason why we need congressional term limits is for the sake of diversity. Although it has gotten better over time, Congress has historically been filled with white males and little else. According to the American Center for Women in Politics, women make up barely over 19% of our current Congress. Minorities are also underrepresented, as you can see in this chart from the Pew Research Center. The top line represents the percentage of whites in Congress, and the bottom line is the percentage of whites in the U.S. population. And as you can see, whites in Congress are grossly overrepresented, which means that minorities are underrepresented. So now that we know, for the sake of ideas, principle, and diversity, congressional term limits are needed, and that's obvious. But as we know, things like that are easier said than done. If we did do it, how would we do it? Well, there is a clear plan for congressional term limits, and that would be an amendment to the Constitution that provides 2 for the Senate and 3 for the House. And that seems like very few terms until you think about it and it makes sense. Edward Crane, former president of the Cato Institute, was a huge proponent of 2 and 3 term limits for the Senate and House respectively, and he focused on 2 main reasons why in his article on the subject. He said that for those few term limits, it kept the representatives closer to their private sector and away from their homes in D.C., keeping their minds closer to their constituents' needs and not their own. And he also pointed out the fact that as it is today, Congress mostly attracts people who want to be career politicians rather than those who would rather do it as a source of civic duty or something. For those people, if they could see that they had a better chance of getting in and it wouldn't take them as long to make a difference, they might be more willing to do something. So now that we know that we need it and how we would do it, the real question that we all care about is if it actually works. So for the easiest comparison, let's look to the states. According to the Cato Institute, California, in their first election after instituting term limits, saw a 30% increase in new legislators. And that's a very important number because 30% allows many new people to come in and contribute with their ideas, but it also allows for people with expertise and experience to stay in as well. In an article by Rutgers University, both Oregon and Michigan saw an increase in women elected, but the greatest strides were made for minorities. In the same article by Rutgers University, it said that the gains for minorities and races for term-limited seats was proportionately greater. Arkansas and Michigan specifically had minorities taking seats in their own districts that had been white for decades or more. So now we know, for the sake of the spread of ideas, principle, and diversity, congressional term limits are absolutely necessary. We need to expand the spread of ideas happening in our society to our government. And for the sake of principle, it's just. And we need to expand, again, the diversity that's happening in our society to our government as well. And for 2 and 3 seats, best accomplishes these goals. And when we looked at the states, it proved those exactly. So just like in our universities, we would never want to have the same professor for every single class, every semester, all 4 years. And in other areas like sports, sometimes we just get tired of seeing the New England Patriots at the Super Bowl, things like that. So what can you do to get congressional term limits? Well, as you've heard from many people in this speech competition, contacting your representatives and telling them what you want is key to democracy. You can't expect anything to be done unless you tell them first. So you need to contact your representatives and tell them what you want to see, and hopefully that includes congressional term limits. Because as we have seen, too much of even a good thing can actually turn out to be pretty a bad thing. Thank you.